Ladies and gentlemen, we are working on our review for transformations. And the first one we're looking at here is a translation of what? So ABC onto A prime, B prime, C prime is a translation of what? So I like it written X, comma, Y, where you add or subtract from them to get there. So to get from B to B prime, I had to go to the right how much? Right means positive, and I had to go over 4. Okay? And then I went down 9, so y minus 9. These first 8 problems will be multiple choice, guys, but you need to make sure you get the right answer. My multiple choice questions tend to be the worst ones, so please be careful of that. Don't just guess. All right, number 2. Sorry that this is so dark. I'm going to reflect over x equals 1, and it's that dotted line right there. So I know C is 1 away, so I put 1 away on the other side. B is 3, so I go 1, 2, 3. A is 2, so it's 2 on the other side. So this is my new one where this is B prime, C prime, A prime, and I am just going to list them next to it. A prime is 3, negative 2. B prime is negative 2, negative 1, or B image. C image is 0, 1. Do I have any questions so far about those two? Feel pretty confident about that basic translation, basic reflection? Okay. 3 I had a few more questions about. If we're reflecting across the y-axis, we know that's negative x comma y, right? Okay, because if I reflect across the y-axis, my y doesn't change, but my x does. Okay, so if it's negative x, y, that means I'm going to change this first one sign from negative to positive, and the y stays the same. We feel comfortable with that? Okay. This is the one that I got asked a lot of questions about. Perform a glide reflection. Okay. A translation for y equals 0, and can you guys see that? And then a translation of 0, negative 2. Okay, so first we're going to flip it over y equals 0. Y equals 0 we know is the x-axis. So that means the y changes. So this first one is x comma negative y. Okay, so I'm going to first change it. My first one is 2, negative 3. Then B is negative 4, negative 6. Then my first C is 0, positive 2. Okay, next I'm just subtracting 2 from the y. So that becomes A double prime is 2, negative 5. B is negative 4, negative 8, right? And C is 0, 0. I had a lot of questions when I was going over this with students. Do you have questions about that? Yes.
Do you always start with the one on the right?
Yes. Yes. Kind of like if you're working with parentheses, you go to the inside and work your way out. So think of it like that.
So you start which words?
Yes. Because this right here says T, 0, comma, negative 2. That means a translation across negative 2. So that means you have to go 2 down. So that's why we're subtracting 2. Yes?
Where did you get the negative 5 from?
Negative 3 minus 2 more gives us negative 5, right? Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. Any more before I move on from that front page? Okay, so I had a lot of people ask about these vectors. Okay, vectors is just showing how far a translation is. You can just do it right here. Okay, that's a vector for that one. Here's a vector for this one. Here's a vector for this one. Here's a vector for this one. Okay? On your test tomorrow, it'll show a vector where it's like going, I don't know, up 2 over 4, and you have to figure which one of these does that. It goes up 2 over 4. But it'll just show you that little arrow, and you'll have to count how much goes up and over. Okay? All right. Any questions about number 5? I know that was confusing for a lot of you guys when you were looking through it. All right. We're looking at number 6 then. All right, I'm just going to pick a point to look at. I'm going to look at 4, I'm going to look at R, which is 4, negative 1. Now, what happens when I go to R image? What point is that at? 1, 4. Okay, so I went from x comma y to negative yx. Do you guys see that? See how my x went there, y went there, and I changed the sign? Okay, so now I'm going to look up on the board. Which one's negative yx? Oh, it's 90 degrees clockwise, counterclockwise. Or negative 270 degrees clockwise. Okay. Now you can of course double check it by looking at S and Q too, but I would just pick one. All right, looking at number 7. What is going on here? If I want to go from start to finish, so she reflected over the y-axis, then she reflected over the x-axis. If I wanted to go from the start to the finish, what would I do and skip the middle? Which is what kind of thing? 180 degree rotation, yes. Does 180 degrees, does it matter which way it's going, counter or clock? No, because it ends up at the same spot. Any questions from this page before I move on? Okay. All right. So this says we're going to graph the line x equals 3. We need to find a second line. So when it's reflected over those two lines, it has a translation of 8 units. And then it wants us to write the composite. So we need 2 things to get full credit for this. We need to find out what the line is, the second line, and we need to write the composite. Okay, does anybody remember that equation that I talked about? How do we find the translation when we reflect over 2 lines? 2 times the second line minus the first line equals the translation. Okay, so let's replace those with what we have. We know we bring down the 2. Instead of the second line, we don't know what that is, so I'm going to place it with x. We know the first line is 3, and we know the translation is 8. We okay? 2 times the second minus the first equals the translation. This was on this quiz. This was on a couple warm-ups. This was on a couple packets. So you do need to know this. Okay, so I'm going to distribute the 2, and I get 2x minus 6 equals 8. I add 6 to both sides. I get 2x equals 14, so I get x equals 7. That's one part. The second part is just the composite. So how am I getting over 8 units? Remember, it's x plus 8 comma y. If you have those 2 things, you will get 100% on this problem. Any questions about this? Yes?
Am I?
Figured it out?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, yes.
Why didn't you do anything on the graph?
You don't have to. The graph is there if you need it. You could totally, like reflect this over this line and then figure out what you would have to reflect over to move 8. Okay? I mean, this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I I did want you to see that 1, 2, 3, 4. See how they're 4 away from each other? You double that and it'll end up moving 8 units.
Then how did you get the 2 and 3?
Okay. How did I get this 3 right here?
Yeah.
Right here in the problem.
Okay.
Any others? Okay. Please make sure it tells you what to do in here. It tells you graph this line, find the second line. So you know that's the second, that's our x that we're looking for. Okay? It tells you what the translation is. Right? Keywords, translate, second line, first line. Tells you all of your information in the problem. Okay. Let's look at number 10.
What about
9. Okay, this graph right here is not necessary, okay, but some people like it. I know some people get mixed up what x equals 0 and what y equals 0 are, so sometimes that helps. Okay, x equals 0 is, we're going to go negative x comma y. Y equals 0 is x comma negative y, okay? So that's that first line right here is negative x comma y. So I'm just going to change the sign of the first one all the way through. All I'm doing. So I get negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, negative 6, and negative 6, negative 10. All I did was change the sign of the first one. Yes?
this always confuses me, like with negative x. Like, why does negative equals
Okay, so it doesn't mean negative. It means to change the sign. Okay? So it's negative x, y. It doesn't mean the y has to have a positive number. It just means whatever it is, you leave it that way. It's kind of like timesing it by negative 1, right? Like this is timesing it by 1, so it doesn't change, where this is timesing it by negative 1. Is that better? Okay. I've had a lot of people get that mixed up. So it's a really good question. Okay. The next one is x comma negative y. Do I go back and I change this top one or the middle one? Middle. Middle, middle, middle. So I'm going to keep the sign of the x the same, so I bring down that negative 3, but I'm going to change the sign or times it by a negative 1 for the second. Okay, so I get negative 1, 6, and negative 6, 10. Okay, if I went from the top to the bottom, what would I get? So I have x comma y, that's 3, negative 2, and I end up negative x, because I end up negative 3, my sign changed. I go from negative 2 to positive 2, so I changed my sign there, or times it by a negative 1. So then I look at the rotations chart. Negative x, negative y is how many degrees? 180 degrees, negative x, negative y, rotation. And it doesn't matter which direction if you're looking at 180. Okay, any other questions about this one? Okay. So these were the ones that I had the most questions on, or the most often you guys were leaving blank. Okay, my first step is always to make a horizontal line. Okay, I'm going to label between A and line 1, I'm going to label it X. Between A and line 2, I'm going to label it Y. This is where you might want to use your mirror. Okay, you line it up right on line 1. I'm going to take A across it, so I get A prime right here. I bring the X with it. Okay, then I want to line it up on line 2. I want to go all the way to A prime, so I've got Y, X, X, A prime. So I'm going to do it the opposite way, Y, X, X, A double prime. So between line 1 and line 2, it's what? What's between line 1 and line 2? X plus Y. What's between A to A double prime? 2y plus 2x or 2x plus 2y. You can write it either way. The A, look from here to the end. 2x's, 2y.
Oh.
Any other questions about this one? A lot of you were leaving this blank. Even though a lot of you aced this quiz last week. Don't forget everything I taught you. Okay. Can I move on to number 11, or do you have another question about this? All right. What is my first step for this one? Okay, from A to that point of intersection. What do I do next? Where does X go? Between what?
A and line 1.
Okay. Then I'm going to do what?
Reflect over line 1.
Okay.
And label X.
Okay.
Then reflect over line 2.
What do I need to do first?
Label X.
Label this Y, because we don't know that it's the same angle.
And then reflect over line 2.
And then reflect over line 2.
Yeah.
And I'm bringing the Y with me. Okay. What else do I need? Line 1 to line 2 is what?
X was that.
A to A double prime is what?
2, 2, yeah.
Beautiful. Questions about this one? Remember to bring A over line 1 and then A prime or A image over line 2. All right, let's look at our dilation. All right, the first thing we're going to do with a dilation is we are going to draw a line from A to B and we're going to measure it. I get 3 1/2. Okay, so A to B is 3 1/2, and then I'm going to times that by 1.5. And I'm going to get 5.25. So remember, I'm going in a positive direction, so I start from A always. I'm going positive, and I'm going 5.25. This is my B prime. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing. We got A to C and A to D. A to C, I'm going to call that 2. I'm going to times it by 1.5, and I'm going to get 3. Okay. A to D, I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to call it, what? I'm going to call it 4. 4 times 1.5 gives me 6. We call that D prime. And then these connect, and I can see that my triangle is 1.5 times as big. Questions, comments, concerns about dilations? Okay. What is number 13? Is it a translation, rotation, dilation, or reflection? Rotation. Okay. Guys, I totally think you should copy it down on a piece of patty paper and twist it to try to find where the center is. Okay, it's approximately here. And then we're going to take a protractor and we're going to measure that angle. So I'm going to label this as center. I I drew B to it and B prime to it. I'm going to measure this angle. It's approximately 40 degrees. And it goes this way, 40 degrees counterclockwise. Okay, I think the rotations of these are the hardest one, so it will not be a rotation on the test. Okay, so that means it'll either be a dilation, reflection, or translation. Okay, number 14. What is this? I think it's a dilation and translation. I do not think it's a reflection because I think it's a negative translation. So I think it's a dilation of -1/2 and a translation. Okay, so I think if we took a spot and made it the center, okay, and then said from that spot to B was 4, and I just went 2. You do not have to do this, by the way. You have to just tell me what you think it is. A 1. C is 2.5. Okay. So do you see how it, when you take it by a -1/2, it should turn the opposite way when you take it by a negative. Oh, because it should be over here. This is incorrect. This should be A to this point to B is 3, so we want to go 1/2. This was 1. And this was 4.5. It turns around. When we take it negatively, it flips it anyways. So it's facing a different direction. And then you can change it. Okay. So number 14, just give me your best guess. You do not have to draw all this. I just wanted to show you what it looked like. Okay. Are there any questions that you want me to go over again that you did not understand? 14, 13, 12, any of these? Yes. Number 7. Okay. Number 7, it gives you all of these directions. Basically what it wants is, how do I go from start to finish? Skipping the middle. So I want you guys to see that that's a 180-degree rotation. Okay. Skipping that middle part. All right. What is nice about this is if you have a reflection over intersecting lines that's 90 degrees, twice that is your rotation. Any others? Yes. It'll look similar. It might not be 180 degrees, but it'll look similar. Any others? Okay. The first 7 or 8 questions, I think it's 8. The first 8 questions are going to be multiple choice. Please be careful of those. And then the next 6 are going to be where you have to work them out. Please, please, please be careful with these. Try your best. With the, don't just, the multiple choice is going to be worth a decent amount. So please make sure you spend some time looking at those. Okay? If you have not done this, if you just copied what I did on the board, I suggest getting a blank one of these and trying it again. Okay? Or printing one out when you get home. I really expect you to, like, if you just read this, if you just go through and, like, read this over, that's not going to help. You've got to try these problems again. Yes. Yes. Okay, any others? Any other questions? All right, guys. You've got the rest of the hour to look through this and study. There's some of you that still have missing work from when you were absent. Please make sure you turn that in. Remember, late work can be turned in a day late for half credit.